Speed up.
Hi everybody. So to finish off this marathon, I'm going to play some good old Gradius III, but it might not be the Gradius III that you remember. So yeah, let's just go ahead and dive right on in 3, 2, 1, and I forgot which one's the one player. Okay. So what exactly are we doing here today? So, this is Gradius III, from the arcades, you know. But it's not the Gradius III that you might be familiar with. This is actually an early build of Gradius III that was shown at the, Amusement Machine Trade Show Festival in 1989 for 2 days before the game actually officially released. So, this being an early build, of course, there's going to be quite a few differences to the original. Obviously, it seems like graphics and audio is mostly similar to the final, but with just this first stage already, you can tell that there's a added background that isn't there in the final build. And you may be asking how I'm playing this. Well, you probably already know that it's this title was revived, and M2 was able to include it on the Gradius Origins collection that released last month. And so that's how I'll be able to show it to you. So we're gonna go on a little tour through this game, and I'll kind of talk about this build, and we're just gonna kind of show it off because there's actually quite a few interesting things about it. So one of the more main differences with this early build of the game is that it is way slower paced than the final build, which is saying something because the final build of the game already ran at the speed of molasses. So, there's only 7 stages this time around, and let's see what else is there to talk about. Weapons have been slightly altered. There's a couple of weapons that aren't present in the final build of the game, mainly in the edit mode. There's a weapon known as the control missile, and that was dumb. But since I'm on Gradius Origins, we have access to rewind. And so I'm just going to be using that because there is absolutely no way I would go for a marathon 1cc of this game in legit circumstances. I know I've done some crazy stuff, but I still have not properly 1cc'd this game. I haven't really tried a whole lot recently, but you'll see why. I haven't really done a whole lot of attempts at it. This build is definitely harder than the final build, as to be expected, because there's, as unpolished as the final version of Gradius III is, and how much jank it has, this has even more of it. So one difference with the weapons is that Reduce is actually available as an option for the 7th power-up slot. And so you can actually combine Reduce with the whatever shield you have. And here's an interesting difference. So you saw that there was a bunch of added terrain in stage 1 that's only present in high loops on the original, but also this stage has different bosses. So this is Wyvern, and then once you destroy it, it turns into Vulture Dragon. And I figured they must have decided that this boss was too unfitting to be the boss of a desert level, so they moved it to the fire stage and gave us Goliath in the final build, which I would argue was a smart move. Okay. So now we're going to be switching to the Ripple Laser here, and another difference between the AM show version and the final build is that with the Ripple and Twin Lasers, you can actually fire 6 shots at a time. And the Ripple Laser has a huge hitbox, which definitely makes it a very powerful weapon. at the cost of tanking the game's frame rate just about every single time you use it. Alright, so stage 2 is the bubble stage, just like the final build. Weirdly, the bubbles actually give 100 points in this version. In the final build, they only give 10. And they also give score as they split apart, which I'm pretty sure is just a mistake. And you might be asking why I'm playing with the shield. It doesn't really matter because I'm going to be using Rewind for this run anyways. The force field in this game also has a laughably big hitbox to the point where it is basically completely useless. It still takes 6 hits, just like in the final build, but you basically just can't get close to anything, or it'll just wear out in seconds. The shield isn't much better, but it at least can withstand a little bit more. And honestly, there's not a whole lot that's going to be coming at you from behind in this game that the force field would be able to help you against. Yeah, I'm not going to be firing a whole lot of spread bombs because, as you'll come to see, this version of the bubble stage is very, very long, and it's also prone to slowdown, so the less I slow down the game, the shorter it'll be. And yeah, as you can already tell, I have the second rewind phase. So for those who don't know how rewind works in the arcade version, because you don't really see it a whole lot, it's different than the SNES version, where you still die in one hit. All it really does is just shrink your hitbox. It's not like the SNES version where you get 2 free hits. So on the PS2 and PSP ports, you can unlock an extra edit mode, and in there you can unlock the special option and shield power-ups from the SNES port, which does include the updated Reduce. So here's a new feature, here's a new part to this stage. So it kind of goes into empty space here for a little bit, and we have these enemies, which don't appear at this stage at all in the final build. Instead, you only see the orange variants replacing the Zub Rush or the Boss Rush in the final stage. So they were originally intended to appear here, I guess, and then they just decided it wasn't fitting. This stage just kind of goes on and on. On average, I think it usually takes somewhere around like 6 minutes, which is like twice as long as the arcade version. Whereas it's twice as long as the final build, even with slowdown. So they definitely made an improvement to this level. It is kind of interesting, kind of going into empty space there for a little bit, but now we're going to be heading back into the actual terrain. It's also crazy just how much score you get from this stage. You can super easily score over 100,000 points just from shooting all the bubbles. Don't worry, we're getting close. We're getting somewhat close to the end. I'm sure you've already fallen asleep by now. Let's go ahead and go up to 3 speed up since I haven't done that yet. Just like the final build, at the end of the stage, we have these bubble enemies that come out from the holes in the ground. They have names, and they do have a gallery that tells you what their names are in Gradius Origins, but I did not pay attention to it, and I have no idea what their names are. They actually behave slightly differently. The bubbles don't pop automatically. You have to shoot them for the enemies to be released, otherwise they just float off into space. But otherwise, they're basically the same as before. It's also interesting to see orange bubbles because those aren't really in the final game. Alright, I promise you we're at the end of the stage now. And the boss, as the same as the final build, it is Bubble Eye. And let's just say Bubble Eye got heavily nerfed in the final build, and you'll see what I mean here in just a second. Yeah, there's not normally this many bubbles that fly around on screen at once during this fight, so which leads me to believe that this is unintended behavior for it, and that they actually just fixed it for the final build. It also has like slightly more erratic movement. Fighting this boss is always extremely stressful, just because there's kind of an element of randomness to it. So sometimes you just kind of get sniped out of nowhere, and there's very little you can do about it.
Shield.
Also, there's only one dogfight theme in its departure for space. The other dogfight theme, Try to Star, isn't in this build at all. Likely they just hadn't composed it yet. I've heard conflicting reports on whether this is actually the true, like, ROM for the AM show version of Gradius III, because, I've always had this weird feeling about this, because on the one hand, it feels too close to the final build in terms of graphics and audio to be the true prototype, but it's also different enough to where it's obvious that it's not just like a glorified ROM hack. So I guess this was like super close to the end of development, and they just hadn't fully laid out all the stages yet. So you may be wondering what this stage is, and you can probably tell from the music that this is the plant stage music, but this doesn't quite look like the plant stage. I don't know if it was intentional for the colors at the start of the stage to look this way or not. It almost kind of looks corrupted in a way, but now you can start to see the actual plant life show up. Now it's starting to look a little bit more coherent. So I think the idea was something along the lines of, as you get further and further into the stage, more and more plant life shows up. And of course they just completely ditched that idea on the finals build and just gave us regular plant stage the whole way through. And we still have these arms. And I can make this game slow down here, and we have blocky MSX scrolling now because of how slowly the screen scrolls. This section's kind of annoying because there's a bunch of jumpers that come from behind. Yeah, aside from the different stage layout and being longer and not having more of those arms that you see, the stage is pretty close to the final build. At least conceptually speaking. Design that you just, that enemy design that you just saw me shoot down, I don't think appears in the final game at all. I could be mistaken, but I don't remember ever seeing it show up. So, I guess there's a cut enemy design that didn't make it. There's a lot of unused enemy designs in the in the game's ROM. If you look on the cutting room floor, you'll see a bunch of them. This still doesn't have a dedicated... The AM show version still isn't documented on the cutting room floor. I would do it if I wasn't lazy. And if I actually knew how to make articles on there. Anyway, here's Choking Weed. It's basically the same as before, except it starts its first attack phase closer to the left side of the screen, which makes it harder to avoid. And having the shield is extremely... This is the one place where having the shield is so much better than the force field, because the force field just rubs off from literally everything, and so it's just useless during this fight. But at least with the shield, you actually get some protection. I'm gonna go ahead. Oh. I picked up one capsule too many, so now I don't have the shield anymore. I don't think... That shouldn't be a problem. And really, it doesn't matter, because I have Rewind. And I can just use that if I die. Because, yeah, recovering in this version of the game, you're probably familiar with... If you're familiar with the arcade version of Gradius III, you know that its checkpoints are just horrendous. They're even worse in this build. Recovering just basically doesn't happen in this game, aside from, like, the final stage, which you'll see in a little bit. So, this stage has finite vertical scrolling enabled throughout the entire stage, which is very obviously a mistake, as you can see. It also seems like there's some enemies in the lower half of this stage area, which is kind of weird, considering you're very unlikely to be able to actually see them. And this is the volcano stage, which of course was stage 3 in the final build, but is stage 4 here. And not a whole lot different to see here. At least for the first half of the stage, so we're just gonna slowly trudge our way through. Yeah, to anybody who's ever complained about the arcade version of Gradius III being a slow game, just keep in mind it could have been so much worse. Like, this is just awful. I mean, the final build isn't much better, but at least it's an improvement. And of course, there's no special enemy to switch the music, so we're gonna be having to... No, you don't know a long time ago this time around. And then here's the volcanoes, which seem kind of broken in this version. They don't really spit out rocks in a very consistent way. The rocks almost feel like too fast. And they're very erratic also. It doesn't feel quite right. And this section's fun. So I would use the tail gun instead of the vertical specifically for this section because of how many freaking jumpers there are coming from behind here, but the vertical is just overall better. It's good to have an upwards firing shot for this level. Oh boy, this isn't good. Yeah, hatches have a weird delay to them also. A lot of hatches take a while to actually spit out enemies. But the enemies themselves are just as aggressive before. Also shouts that platform floating in the air. That was completely unintentional. Okay, so now we're going to be heading into the underground section, and there's no unique music here this time, so you just get to listen to In the Wind for even longer, which is fine. I mean, the song is a banger. Unfortunately, I can't shoot any of those cannons without the hail gun. And the underground section is a lot more boring than before. As you can see, there's still some dirt here, but you're really not going to be seeing much of it because I'm going to spend most of my time just going through this maze. And what's interesting is that if you've ever seen the Gradius fan game Gradius 95, which is almost entirely based off of the arcade version of Gradius 3, it's not a port of Gradius 3 on the PC 98, but it takes a lot of inspiration from that game. This volcano, the underground portion to that game's volcano stage is very similar to this, which is kind of an interesting. I don't know if it was a coincidence or not, but if you ever take a look at what that stage looks like, you'll notice it's shockingly similar. Also, the hatches in this stage are so annoying. Because they release enemies from off-screen, and without good option placement, it's usually difficult to reach them because of all the walls everywhere. I like how like 3 duckers just ran into my shield in a row. That was fun. This stage also kind of drags on and on for a little while. And obviously the vertical scrolling is still unlocked here, but I'm pretty sure that's intentional. But you probably saw that it's unlocked throughout the entire stage, which is very obviously a mistake. And they fixed that in the final build, which is good. I would really like to be able to switch back to the Ripple Laser before the end of this stage. Or, I'd like to be able to switch back to the Ripple Laser by the end of this stage, and you'll see why in a little bit. Now we go even deeper underground. And I guess their original idea, which they kind of kept in the final game, was to just have a bunch of underground volcanoes. Because, you know, that makes sense. This time, though, you are forced to deal with them, whereas in the arcade version, in the final build, it's optional. And the jumpers just keep coming and firing bullet sunbursts. That was a little bit scary. And there's no Iron Maiden sub-boss this time around. Even though right here it looks like there should totally be one.
Laser.
Alright, let's go ahead and switch back to the laser, because I don't think I'm going to need the vertical for the rest of the stage. That was almost like really bad timing to go through those volcanoes. So I'm going to use the funny strategy here. I'm going to scroll the screen upwards a little bit here. And this will allow me to start this boss fight from way above the intended position on screen. And the nice thing about Bitcore Mark III in this version is that it will never go all the way to... It will always stay, like, confined within its intended screen. So, since I'm higher up than intended, it will never actually go all the way up there. And this is the free method for timing it out, which is preferable for this version because the reflecting lasers are even harder to get through because they, like, move to the side weirdly during... as they're, like, firing, and also when you destroy the front two cores, the lasers it spams out are even more frantic. So I'm just going to be timing this boss out. I didn't have to do this, but I wanted to show this strategy off just because it's hilarious. I like how I actually destroyed one of the cores. So yeah, unironically the easiest fight of Bitcore Mark III ever. And to answer the polyhead in chat, here you go. But it uses what I presume is placeholder music, because this is the plant stage music. And there's no power-up capsules. Also, the power-up meter is invisible for whatever reason, probably just because they didn't get around to fine-tuning this stage. And now we get a particularly bizarre stage. And I think I screwed this strategy up, so I'm actually going to rewind. So, my guess for what this stage is intended to be is sort of a, here's a couple of bosses we've already built the coding for, but we haven't figured out what stage to put them in yet. So we're just going to throw them in here so that players can see them. So that was Lizard Core, and you basically have to use that strategy for it, because you can't conceal its arm lasers like you can in the final build, and it has even less of a firing pattern than it does in the final build. And then we have Delinger Core, and you pretty much have to use this baiting strategy that's also usable in the final build, because you tell me whether or not it's possible to get through those lasers. It's not. Even without the bad hitboxes, you just can't get through those lasers. So you basically have to resort to this strategy. I could have taken out the core there if I was good at the game. But there you go. And again, this stage just has placeholder music for some reason. So like I said, my guess for the purpose of that stage is that it's just those are two bosses that they had already designed, but they hadn't put them in actual stages yet. So since this was shown at a trade show festival, they probably just wanted people to see, hey, here's a couple of bosses we've made. Here's what you could expect to see in the final game. So you may be asking yourself, I said earlier that there were 7 stages in this game. So the 3D high-speed stage and those 2 bosses are considered 2 separate stages. So you may be asking yourself, what could the final stage possibly be? Well, it's the early version of everyone's favorite level. The Crystal Stage. So apparently this stage went through a number of different ideas in development. So originally, the idea for the stage was to be a high-speed stage that sort of worked like this, where you had debris coming at you that would make the path as you went along. And in fact, the high-speed stage theme from Gradius II is actually unused in the final. It's present in the final game's code, but unused. Likely as a reference to that. And then I guess they took away the high-speed element of it, but kept the Tetris aspect of it. And then for the final build, they actually gave the stage, like, walls, instead of just having the entire stage be empty space, and you just have to dodge all these piles of cubes. That's basically all what this stage is. And to any, you may be asking, is the cube rush still present here? I've got bad news for you. Give it a second. Yes, and it's even worse than the final build. So the... I already died, that was awesome. So the wall building strategy can't really be used here for a number of different reasons. For one, there's way more cubes that charge you from behind. Yeah, I'm probably going to be using Rewind a ton here because this is just... The cube rush is basically fundamentally the same as the final build, except it's even more annoying. You basically are forced to dodge these things as normal, and it's bad. There is a strategy where you don't shoot anything in the throughout the entirety of the main stage, so you can let a bunch of sprites build up on the far left side of the screen, and that actually makes it possible to lag the game during this cube rush, which makes dodging the cubes a little bit more manageable. It's still a giant RNG fest. But I don't like that strategy because it makes it difficult to get through the actual stage without dying, and I've never actually pulled it off. So instead, you get to see me do this a bunch. So yeah, to anybody who complains about the cube rush in the final build of the game, your complaints are not unfounded, but consider yourself lucky that that's what we got. I know watching me constantly rewind is probably annoying, but it was either that or I use Invincible mode. That's on Gradius Origins, and I figured actually playing this legitimately, or somewhat legitimately, would be interesting. And what was that? Okay, hopefully the last few cubes are really being the death of me here. There we go. And what is this? So, this is something that's not in the final build at all. This boss, I don't know what it's supposed to be, but it's just kind of some giant crystal ring or something like that. Yeah, this is just completely not present in the final game. And it also has a hilarious cheese strategy where you can just sit outside of its circle, and that was dumb. You can actually quick kill this thing in like less than 2 seconds with options, but I intentionally chose to let it live longer so you can kind of see its attack pattern. You basically have to stay outside its ring, or else, like, you're not going to survive inside of there. I wasn't paying attention there. I actually don't know if I'll be able to kill this. Hopefully I can, so that this doesn't drag on for too long. I'm definitely getting some shots in. And at this point, I think it's too late to rewind and show off the actual quick tail, so I think I'm just gonna have to wait this out. Yeah, you just can't really go into there without immediately dying and paying the price for it. Just because there's not enough space between the cubes, the crystals that it fires out. And the hitboxes are bad, as they always are in Gradius III. So really cool that the release of Gradius Origins finally let us see this boss for the first time. I really need to be paying attention. I think this is gonna time out. I think at this point, any chances of me actually destroying this have vanished. But hey, at least you get to actually see what it does instead of having it die in 3 seconds. And there you go. And as anticlimactic of an ending as that is the end of the game. At least after that, it just goes back to loop 1, and the rank doesn't even increase. So there you have it. That's the AM show version of Gradius III. And as you can and with the amount of rewinds you saw me use during the final portion of the Crystal stage, there's a very good reason why I haven't gone for an actual 1cc of this, and why I chose to use rewind for this particular run. But hey, the goal was to just show off what this build is, and hopefully you enjoyed seeing that. So with that, that's all I've got. So thank you for watching, and I'll throw it back on over to the hosts.